Hello. So let's wait for a few more to join and then we'll commence the class. So it's 8:32. I think we'll better start. So good evening. So we'll be dealing with CBSE Class 12 topics. So welcome all of you to Unacademy. Yes, hello Karthik. Welcome to my class. Am I audible to you? So I hope I'm audible. So before starting the class, so good evening everyone. Let me give you a brief introduction about myself. Hello, I am Shalini. I am a BTech and MTech holder in computer science and engineering. I am a teacher by profession with over 14 years of teaching experience. With an academy, I'm excited to provide an inspiring learning experience to all the students via this online platform. So, before moving on to the lessons, let us have a brief look on Unacademy and its subscription details. So, as you all know, Unacademy is India's largest e learning platform. So, it is a most happening app today because it is not only for a school going student but also for an aspirant who's preparing for a competitive examinations. You get every courses underneath one shell. Okay. So, what you will get in an academy? You get daily live classes wherein you can chat with the educator, engage in the discussions, ask your doubts, and answer via polls all these facilities while the class is going on. So these are the facilities availed in the daily live sessions. All the courses in Unacademy are well structured. Yes, Karthik, I'll come back to you. Well structured and from top educators. Uh, we have a live test and quizzes which will help you in evaluating your preparation towards your target and also give you a brief analysis of how well you're performing towards your examination. And once subscribed, it is unlimited access. So one subscription gets you access to all the live and recorded courses to watch from the comfort of any of your device, be it the laptop or be it your smartphones. So this is how the comprehensive syllabus would look like. Since we are dealing with the class 12, we'll have the different subjects underneath your class, and underneath each subject would be listed what are the different courses available. Okay, so it will look like this. And to avail all these services, you need to download the Unacademy Learning app in your smartphone. I repeat, you have to download and install the Unacademy Learning app. Okay, so download and install in your mobile phones, and then you can have the unlimited access. Now, this is a detailed description on the CBSE Class 12 subscription fee details. So, ranging from 1 month to 12 months. Now, and the subscription fee for the different range is shown on the right side. If you avail my code SLYT, I repeat SLYT, you get a discount of 10% on the subscription fees. Yes, Karthik. Yeah, we'll be covering the full syllabus for the board, but it will be both inside YouTube as well as in the app. The classes would be distributed both in YouTube as well as in app. So in the app also you can see the recorded versions also. Okay. So as I told you, I'll be dealing with the CBSE Class 12 Computer Science. So as per the NCERT syllabus, the students know which is a programming language that you have to learn here, Python, right? So we are learning one by one each topic in detail. Karthik, are you in Class 12? Are you a Class 12 student? So the topic for the day is tuples in Python. You can either pronounce it as tuple or tuple, whatever it is. I'm not going much into the pronunciation, but I'll be following the pronunciation tuple throughout my session. So welcome to Unacademy and welcome to my class. Today we'll be learning on, okay, yes, okay, Karthik. So today we'll be learning on tuples in Python. So these are the contents that I'll be covering in today's lesson. We'll go through the definition and representation of the data type tuples available in Python. We'll learn how to create tuples, what are the different methods, or can you create the data type as such. Comparison of tuples with list, because in the previous class we saw list, right? The data type list. So today we will have, after learning the definition, representation and how to create, we'll be looking in, we'll be having a comparison between the two data types, tuples and list. What all things are in common, what are the similarities and what are the differences between the two data types. Later on, we'll have a look on the different permissible operations inside the data type tuples, followed by the functions and methods. Now, why the two terminologies, functions and methods, that we'll be seeing as we go through the course. Okay, and I think I have already given the difference between the two terminologies when we were learning strings as well as list. So let's move on to our session. Starting with the introduction, what is a tuple? Okay. It is a list of comma separated values of any data type within parentheses. Now, what are parentheses? Parentheses means the round bracket. Okay. The round opening bracket and the round closing bracket. So, the opening bracket would mark the start of a tuple and the closing parenthesis would mark the end of a tuple. Okay. Now, in between these parentheses, what will you have? You will have all the values which are to be inside the tuple. And how will the value appear? Each value would be separated from the other value by the punctuator comma. Okay. Now, let us see what are the data types of the value. Now, as per the definition, the values can be of any data type. So there is no restriction. You can have only a tuple of integer values or only a float values. You can have a tuple of mixed values. That means mixed type values. Okay. So, seen below, I have listed a few examples. Now, this is how we'll be learning. As we learn a definition, then we'll see the examples and then what are possible and what are things not possible in a data type. This is how the lesson would be progressing. Okay. So, example. So, the first one is an example of an empty tuple. So, you will have just the opening and closing round bracket. Now, this is an example of empty tuple. You see that only the opening and closing parenthesis is there and no other values are listed. When no values are found inside the parenthesis, we call it as an empty tuple. Now, tuple with a single member. Now, how is it given? You have the opening and closing bracket, the element or the single element followed by the comma. Okay. Now, this is something that you need to note here. A tuple with a single member is always written like this. How? You have the parenthesis and inside that you will have the data element, the single data element followed by a comma. Now, we'll see why we are using this later on. Okay. Now, see another example, a tuple with numbers. Numbers means it can be either integers or floating point numbers. Floating point numbers means numbers with the decimal part. Okay. So, see here, both integers, a mix of integers and floating point. Now, here you are having an example of a tuple with mixed value types. So, you can have the strings, the integers, the floating point numbers. If you want, you can have another tuple inside that or a list. You can have strings, then you can have the Boolean values. So you can have any type as per the definition says. Now, something that you need to note here is the values of tuple are immutable. Now, what does the terminology immutable means? It means non-changeable. You are not permitted to change a particular value inside a tuple. You cannot modify a value inside the tuple. So once a tuple is created, it is all set. So each position you have a value and that value is fixed. Okay, you cannot modify it. Wherein when you learned list, we learned that they are mutable. So that means a value in a particular position inside the list was permitted to be changed or modified. Moving on, let us see how to create tuples. Now, there are different methods by which you can create a tuple. The first method that we are going to see is the tuple display construct. Okay. So, how to create a tuple? Definitely the assignment has to be done. So, you need the help of assignment operator. Now, what is the assignment operator? Equal to symbol, right? Now, on either side of equal to symbol, what are to be done or what are to be written? That is our concern. On the left hand side, we'll give the identifier or the variable name or the tuple name. Okay. On the left hand side, what will we have on the left hand side? We have the tuple name or the variable which is indicating the tuple. And on the right hand side, you will have the tuple. Now, how will the tuple look like? You have opening and closing parenthesis, and between the parenthesis you will have the list of values. So the values are a sequence in which you would be separating the values with the help of comma. Now the first one shows an empty tuple and the second one shows a tuple with values, and this is how a tuple with values would look like. Okay. Now, when you're creating the tuple itself, you're displaying how the tuple is looking like. So, hence the name tuple display construct. Now, other than this, there is one more method by which you can create a tuple. Now, this is done with the help of the function tuple. Okay. So, how will you create it? Again, you will have to take the help of assignment operator. Now, on the left hand side, you will have the name of the tuple, which is the identifier. So, let us name our tuple to be capital T. And if I am giving capital T is equal to tuple, the function, what will it create? It will create an empty tuple because you have not listed what are the values to be present inside the tuple. So, to create an empty tuple, this is the format or syntax. What is syntax? Syntax is a rule or protocol via which you will be using a particular construct inside a programming language. Okay. Now, you can create a tuple from user's input. Now, all these examples that we have listed below, the programmer itself is assigning the values. Now, if you want to give the provision of assigning values to the end user, there is one more provision. How? That is by reading the values from the keyboard. Now, how can you read the values from the keyboard? Definitely by using our input function, right? So I'll give input, and inside the function I'll give the display message. This display message will come as such on the screen, and using this input function values can be read. Now since this has to be a tuple, now we learned that for creating a tuple we'll take the help of tuple function, right? So we'll give tuple of, and inside that we'll be giving the input function. Now let me give you an example. Okay. The example is T is equal to, you have an empty tuple, and when you're trying to print T, what is T? T is the name of the tuple. Are there any elements inside the tuple? No. So the output will give an empty tuple. So this is how an empty tuple can be created. Now I'll give you another example. Now as I told you, when we were seeing the definition of tuple, we told how an empty tuple would look like, how a tuple with a single element would look like. Okay. Now see this. Suppose I'm giving T is equal to a value inside the opening and closing parenthesis. So you just have a single value here, and this value is 1. And if I'm printing T, now what is my understanding? I have created a tuple with a single element. And when you printed the tuple, what did you get? You got just the element, right? So is that a tuple? No. When it is a tuple, the representation or what is the representation for a tuple? It has to be enclosed between the parentheses. Now this is not shown here. So if you want a tuple with a single element to be created or printed on screen, what is the thing that you have to note? You have to have the opening and closing parenthesis. You need to write the single element and then put a comma. Now this will show that this is a tuple. Now when you're trying to print T, now what is T? The name of the tuple. Now when you're trying to print T, the output would look like a tuple. I hope this is understandable. Now this is a reason why we are attaching a comma at the tail end of a single element tuple. So to construct a tuple with one element, add a comma after the single element. Now this is your conclusion or inference. Now there can be one more method. Okay. So suppose you want to create a sequence of values together. Now the tuple function will allow you to do that also. The syntax is T is equal to tuple of sequence. Now this in the place of sequence, the sequence can be a string, it can be a list, or even a tuple. Okay. So this is how you are able to create by having a sequence of values, you're able to create a tuple. Now we'll see each one of them as examples to better understand what is being listed in the syntax. Now, as I told you, please note the format. You have the variable for naming the tuple. You use the assignment operator equal to, then tuple of. Now, the tuple function, and inside the function, you will be giving the sequence. Now, this sequence can be string, list, or tuple. Now, so we're going to see how this can be implemented. Now, I told you the value has to be specified inside the function. Yes, Mukesh. Hello, welcome to the class. So, I told you the value or the sequence has to be passed as argument to the function. Whenever you are passing a value to the function, it is called as the argument or parameter. We will see the differences of argument and parameter when we learn functions in detail. Now let us see when the sequence is in the form of a string. Okay. So T is equal to tuple of hello. Now hello is a string. Why? Because it is enclosed between single quotes. Now it shows that it is a string. And now when you are trying to print T, now what have you tried to do? You had tried to create a tuple. Now you have passed a string inside the function. Now, when you try to print the tuple, it will come in the form of a tuple. Now, how will it come in the form of a tuple? The representation would be shown. So, that means you have opening and closing brackets. Now, inside the opening and closing brackets, you will have the values listed. Okay. Now, the sequence of values which are separated by comma. Now, each of the character inside the string would be an element of your tuple now. Okay. So, the string was hello. It contained HELLO, right? So, you had 5 characters. Now, you will have 5 elements inside your tuple. All are of string type. Okay. So, this is how it will look like when you try to print the output of your tuple. Yes, Mukesh, thank you. So moving on to a second example, I told you that in the previous example, to create a tuple, you can have a sequence and the sequence is passed as an argument to the function. Now the sequence can be a string, list or tuple. Now we saw an example when the sequence is a string. In the second example, we are going to see when the sequence is a list. Okay. Now I have assigned a list here. Now what is the name of the list? L. Okay, and I have 3 elements inside the list. Now the specialty of the list, the symbol for demarking the list is square brackets. Okay, so we have a list here. Now we are trying to create a tuple from the list, right? Is the idea clear? We are trying to create a tuple from the list. So what I have to do is inside the tuple function, I need to pass the list. Now what is the name of a list here? L, right? So inside the tuple function, what is the value that would be passed? We would be passing the value small letter L, which indicates so inside the tuple function, you will be specifying the name of the tuple. Okay, and once the tuple is created, it has to be assigned to the variable T. Now what will T be? T will be the newly created tuple. Now when you're trying to print T, what will happen? You'll have the same values as in the list, but see the demarcation here. We have the opening and closing brackets, right? So 1, 3, H. So these are the same values as in the list, but now we have created a tuple out of the list. Now, if you want to create a tuple from a tuple, it's no big deal because instead of assigning a list here, you can assign a tuple and then again use it inside the function and then print it. You get the same result. Okay. So the only difference is if the sequence has to take the form of a tuple, instead of the list here, you need to give a tuple here. That is the only thing to be noted. Now, we have seen an introduction of tuples. Now, right now, what we are going to see is a comparison of tuples and list. Okay. So, these are the 2 data types that we have studied recently. In the last class, we saw list the definition, ranging from the definition, the different permissible operations, and then the different functions and methods used in list, with each of them with an example, right? Now we are trying to we introduce the new data type tuples here. Today we're going to see, or right now we're going to see the comparison of both of these data types. That means tuples and list. Okay. Now the first thing that we need to notice, both of them has many things in common, but still they are different. That is the reason why they have been listed as two different data types, right? So tuple and list have lots in common, yet they are different. Now let us first see the similarities and later on we'll see the differences. Now the similarities between tuples and list. Now this is the same way that we compared and studied the comparison of list and strings also. Now when you're trying to see the similarity, whatever was possible in list will be possible to an extent in tuple also. Now we're going to see what are the things that both have in common. I mean something that was possible in list and tuple. Those are the things that we'll be listing under the heading of similarity. So see the first one, usage of the function len. Now I call this as a function because the name followed by the opening and closing parenthesis. Now whenever you have the parenthesis, you need to have an indication that this is a function. Okay. Now we learn what a function is in a due course of time when we deal with the topic functions in Python. Whenever we are seeing a name followed by an opening closing bracket, the first thing it has to come to your mind is it is a function. The second thing, see the name len. It is not a name that you have assigned, but this is a built-in function. Since it is not assigned by you, it is already defined in the language, right? It has a specific purpose. Now this purpose can be met when you are using the function. Now there will be a format in which the function has to be used. So the first one is usage of len function. Now what we need to understand is what is this function used for? What does it use for? It will give you the count of the items inside the data type. So if you are using len with tuples, what will it be giving? It will be giving the number of items or the count of items that is present inside your tuple. Okay. Now what else is common in between tuples and list? Indexing and slicing is common. Then accessing the individual elements. Now I told you that tuple has more than one element. We need to understand how the elements can be accessed. Now each of the element inside the tuple has a specific position number. This position is called as index. Now using the index you can access the elements. Now we saw how the same thing can be done in list. We'll be looking into how this can be done with tuple also. Then we have the membership operators in and not in. Then for concatenation and replication, concatenation is joining and replication means repeating. The operators associated with each of them, plus is the operator used for concatenation, and asterisk is the operator asterisk or star operator. It is used for replication. Now let us see a detail of what we have seen in the previous slide. These are all the detailed description on the similarities. The function len of t. Okay. What does len do? Len is for finding the length, right? Length means number of items. Now it has to find the number of items of your tuple, right? So inside the len function, you will have to pass the tuple. So len of t means t is the name of your tuple. Now, what will be the result? If you try to print the value of len of t, what will be the result? It will give you an integer value. Now, this integer value will tell you the number of items inside the tuple t. Okay. Now, let us see how the indexing is done. So, t of I. Now, where is I written? How is I written? I is written within square brackets. Now, what will be t? T is the name of the tuple and I is the index value or the position value. I told you index is nothing but the position value. If you're having a representation T of I, where I is specified inside the square brackets. Yes, hello Ria, welcome to the class. Now, when you're writing T of I and I is represented inside square brackets, it will be returning the value or the item inside the tuple T at the index position I. Okay, so this is the inference of this representation. Now, to use the index, we need to know what is a convention used for giving the index values. Okay, so there are actually two conventions. You can have either forward indexing or backward indexing. Forward indexing means you're moving from left to right and it is zero based. So when you're moving from left to right means the very first element that is occurring inside the tuple will have an index 0. Okay, and as you move from left to right, the position number will be incremented by 1 automatically. So the index values would be 0, 1, 2, etc. If you're moving from right to left, then you're using the negative indexing. Okay, so the last element inside your tuple will be assigned the index -1, and as you move on it will be -1, -2, etc. How is the movement done? You have to move from the right to the left, that is from the last element to the first character or element inside your tuple. So this is a convention used for indexing or giving the position value. Now, T of I, where I is represented inside the square bracket, would return the item at index I. Now, see this T of I is to j. Again, inside the square bracket, you are giving two values, I is to j. Now, what this does is, this representation is used for slicing. Now, what is slicing? Slicing means cutting, right? Now, when you have a large tuple, and then when you're trying to slice the tuple, what happens? The end result is also a tuple. Now, when you're trying to slice, you need to give two values, the start value and the end value, so that you will get the tuple fragment, right? So, I and j would be the start and stop indices. Now, what does this representation return to you? It will return a new tuple. I told you, anything that will be cut from the main data type, you end up getting the same thing, right? So, from a tuple, if you are trying to slice, you also get another tuple. Now, the new tuple would be containing elements. Now, from wherein the elements are received? The elements are received between the indexes I as well as j. Okay. Now, the next thing that you need to know is always the start value, that is I, is inclusive inside the tuple. The start value means the start index, but never the stop index is included inside the slice. So that means ranging from I to j -1 and not j. So you need to be very careful. The same thing was followed when we learned strings and list. So next we are going to see the membership operators. So both in and not in works on tuples too. We have seen the membership operators and how it works with list and strings. Now we come to understand that the same thing can be followed with tuples too. Now what is operator in says? It will tell you or give you an idea if a particular element is present inside the tuple or not. Now if it is present, the Boolean value true will be returned. If it is not present, the Boolean value false will be returned. Now what does not in do? In prefixed with not, right? So exactly opposite to what in is doing. So moving on, let us see the concatenation and replication. We saw that the operator plus is used for concatenation and the symbol asterisk is used for replication or repeating a tuple. Now plus means joining. It will add one tuple to the other. Now how is it added? Every time it will be added to the tail end of a tuple. Okay, the second tuple would be added to the tail end of the first tuple. This is how the concatenation happens. We'll be seeing that with an example. And then we have the asterisk operator. Now, which is used for replicating or repeating a tuple. Now, I told you that each of the element can be accessed also. Now, since each element is identified separately by its index or the position value, so it gives you an idea that you can access the elements individually also. Now, this is how the accessing happens, T of I. You need to give the name of the tuple and you need to give the position value. Now, the position value has to be enclosed between square brackets. Now, this is how it will be done. So, the individual elements of a tuple are accessed through their indices. Now, the indices, how will it look like? The index can be either following the convention of forward indexing or following the backward indexing. Whatever it is, the index has to be specified between square brackets. Okay. Okay. Now, let us have an example to understand this. Now, this is a convention when you are using forward indexing. You have a tuple T with 3 elements, 5698. And if I'm trying to print T of 0, now I told you that by default, the first value is in position number 0. So when you're trying to print T of 0, what will be your output? The output will be the first element inside your tuple. Now suppose I'm trying to print T of 1 inside the square bracket. Which value would be printed? 100, right? Now instead of 1, if I'm giving 2, what will be printed? 98 would be printed. Now if I am trying to print T of minus 2, so this is minus 1, this is minus 2. So this is the position or index value minus 2. So T of minus 2 would give you 100. I hope now you could follow this also. Indexing. Now we saw all the similarities between tuples and list. Now we are going to see the differences between tuples and list and why we have two different data types also. Now, in your point of view, that is at the plus 2 level, the only difference that we'll be learning here is tuples are not mutable, but lists are mutable. Okay. So once you make a tuple, it is set and stored. So this is what we learned as per the definition also. So you're not supposed to change a particular value inside the tuple, right? So that means if we have a list L as well as a tuple T, then I can give such an assignment. What an assignment? L of I is equal to element. So that means already the list is having an element at the ith index, and if I'm assigning a new element, such an assignment is valid when you are using list. Okay, but such an assignment is not valid or invalid when you are using tuples. So this is why we say that tuples are not mutable. Lists are immutable. Now one more thing that we need to understand is list occupies more memory than tuples. Now this is just to understand, make you understand the differences. Right now or in your curriculum, you will not be doing or working with tuples or lists with very large data sets. Okay. When it comes to a stage of working with large data sets and when you try to print the size of memory that is occupied by a list variable as well as a tuple variable, we find that list occupies more memory than tuples and hence we will be usually using tuples for that. Now for your information, we have a function of name get size of, which is defined inside the module sys. Okay, so get size of, what it returns is it will return to you the number of bytes for a data type. So if you created a tuple and if you have created a list with the same number of elements, okay, and when you're trying to print the number of bytes occupied by each of them, you can see that list usually occupies more memory. That means the number of bytes taken for list is larger when you compare that with tuple. So when you're considering very small data sets, it is not a matter. But when you're considering very large data sets, say for example, you're working on a population of a country, okay? and you're working on the census data, in that case you're working with a larger data set, and then if you're using list, it is supposed to carry or use much more of the memory space. So I hope you understood this. Next, we are going to see the common tuple operations that are permissible. Okay. So the first one is traversing a tuple. Now, what does traversing means? Traversing means traveling, right? Traversing a tuple means traveling through the elements of the tuple. Now, how can you travel through the elements of the tuple? It is by iterating through the positions, right? So, traversing means accessing and processing each element of it. So, starting from the first value or the first index position till you reach the end of the tuple. Now, you're moving position by position. Now, how can you do that? You have to iterate through the position. Only then you can get an access to the element in each position. So whenever the idea of iteration comes, we know that loops has to be used, right? So let us see the syntax of traversing a tuple. So the syntax says for, using the for loop, for item in tuple. Here the keywords are for and in, followed by the colon, and inside the loop you will have the loop body. Therein you will be processing each item. So let us see an example to understand the syntax or the format. So in the example, I have given a tuple T which is having two elements 9 and M. Now this is a tuple of mixed data type because it has a number as well as a string. Now how do I write to travel through the tuple? I have to use the for loop. So for, in the place of item, I have used the variable I. So what will I indicate? I will indicate each of the element or item inside your tuple. So for each item I inside T, T is the name of your tuple. So for each I in T, what is the action to be performed? You just need to print the value. Now printing will show that you have visited so and so position, right? So I try to print I. Now the first value would be 9, second value would be M, and there are no more values, and then you will exit out of the loop. So this is how traversing is done. Moving on to the second permissible operation inside tuple. We had already seen that when we were learning the similarities between tuples and list, we saw the operation concatenation as well as replication. So concatenation operation. The operator symbol used for concatenation is plus. Now what will plus do? It will join tuples. Okay. So you can join, say if you have three tuples, if you want to join them, you can even write L plus M plus N, where L, M and N are tuples. Now we're going to see a very simple example of joining two tuples here. Okay. So we have a tuple L and then we have a tuple M, and towards the right hand side using the assignment operator, I have listed the values of the tuple of both tuple L as well as M. So what am I trying to do? I am trying to print. What am I trying to print? I am trying to print the result of the concatenation. How do you concatenate it? You have a tuple L, you have a tuple M, then the concatenation operator has to be used. It has to be used in mid of both the tuples. So you'll write L plus M. Now if you want to see the result of the concatenation, L plus M has to be passed inside the print function. So this is what I have written here. See the code fragment. You have two tuples with the name L and M, and then you're trying to print the concatenated result. Now what will be your output? The output is yet another tuple. Now what is the specialty of the tuple? It will have the elements of both L and M. Now something that you need to note is the second tuple would be added to the tail end of the first tuple. This is how the end result or the concatenated tuple would look like. Now, after this, if you try to print L and M, there will be no changes for L and M. Okay, only the concatenation result appears to be like this. So, another thing that you need to note here is when you are using the plus operator, that is the plus operator here on either side of the plus operator when you have tuples. See here, L is a tuple and M is a tuple. When on either side of the plus operator you had tuples, what was the functionality or behavior of the plus operator? Plus behaved as concatenation. Now when you had on either side of the plus operator list, it did the concatenation of list. When plus on either side of plus you had strings, it did concatenation of strings. When it had numbers, does it do concatenation? No, it does the arithmetic addition operation. Now the third one is replication of tuples. Now to repeat a tuple a specified number of times. Okay. I'm sorry. So replication says to repeat a tuple a number of specified number of times. So when replication has to be done, you need to specify the tuple as well as the number. Now this number will indicate how many times the tuple has to be repeated. Okay. Now for replication, the operator used is asterisk, and what will happen? It will return the replicated tuple. Now in the example, we have a tuple of the name L, and these are the values of the tuple. And if you're trying to print L asterisk 2, now you have the tuple as well as a number. Okay. Now what will it do? It will replicate the tuple. Which tuple? It will replicate L. How many times it has to be replicated? I have given the number here as 2. So it has to be replicated 2 times. Now suppose this is your elements inside your tuple. Now how will the output look like? It will look like the same elements is repeated once more and the end result is again a tuple. Okay. So the next what we're going to see is slicing the tuples. Okay. Now as I told you, slicing means you are cutting it into portions. Okay. You have a larger tuple and when you're trying to slice it, what happens? The sliced portion is also a tuple here. So see the slicing of the tuple and the format of using the slicing. We have M is equal to T of start is to stop. Okay. Now it's actually the square brackets we have to show here. So M is equal to T of start is to stop. So you need to give the starting index value as well as the stopping or the end index value here. Now the explanation is you will slice the tuple T. So T has to be created beforehand. Only then the slicing can happen. It is sliced from the index start to stop -1. So as I told you, when you're learning slicing, what we need to understand is both the indices are not inclusive inside the slice. It considers only the start index and not the stop index but stop -1. Okay. Now to better understand this, I have given an example here. We have a tuple M and these are the elements of the tuple. And then I'm trying to slice the tuple M. Okay. Now I need to give 2 index values here. What are the index values to be given? We need to give the start index value as well as the stop index value. Now the sliced tuple is stored in N. Now if you try to print N, you will get the slice. Now let us see how the slicing happens. The start value shows 2, right? So it is taking the convention of forward indexing. So by default, the element 14 is residing at position 0. The element 3.14 at position or index 1. And then C is in position 2. So we have reached the start index value. So I understand that the slicing has to happen from here. Okay. Now see the stop value. Stop value is a negative number. So here the convention of negative indexing is used. So naturally you need to move from right to left. Okay, so we see that the element H is in position -1 and 59 is in position -2. Now will the stop be taken? No, right? So the one value before stop. Now the slice result would be C500. So this is the end result of your slice. Now the slice is again a tuple. Now this is something that you need to note here. Now to better understand what are the different forms of variance in which the slicing can be done, I have shown some examples here. So this is our tuple. The name of the tuple is M, and on the right hand side I have assigned and showed the list of values of the tuple. Now I'm trying to do the slicing. Now M2 is to -2. The slicing had been done in the previous slide also. So you know the output. The output would look like this. Okay. Now see the second type. Here I have omitted the start value, but I have given some value or some index value as the stop, right? Now, if the start value is omitted, what happens is the default start value is always taken to be 0. Okay. The default start value is taken to be 0 means it is always taken as the first element. And then we'll find out where is the position 7 or index 7. So this is in 0, 3.14 in index 1, at C in index 2, then 5 in index 3, 100 in index 4, 59 at index 5, and 6 at index H. Did we find an index 7 here? Now, even if you're giving a value out of bound from your tuple index, this will not cast an error in the case of slicing. What will happen is, since the stop value is omitted, it will take the default stop value as your start. So slicing happens from here and it will move and go till the end of your string. So your entire string would be printed here. Is the idea clear? You get the entire string here. Now let us see the next one. In the next one, I have asked the slicing to start from the starting position, which is a starting position. 0 is your starting position, but I have not specified your end, okay, or the stop value here. Now, so by default, if the stop value is omitted here, what Python does is it will take the last index. Okay, what is the last index? Is 6. So till the last of the tuple. So starting from 0 or from the start value, whatever is mentioned inside your slice to the end of your string. So this is how you end up in the entire tuple. Now let us see, is this causing an error? What? That is, you are omitting both the start value as well as the stop value. Now we find that no error is being casted here. Instead, you get an output also. So when the start value is omitted, the default start value is supposed to be 0, right? When the stop value is omitted, we saw that the default stop value is the end of your tuple. So what will be the result of this? You get the entire tuple as your answer. So I hope this is also understandable. So to understand the slicing and different variants, or in what all way you can give the indexes, that is why I have casted this example, and to make you understand that out of bound value does not cast any error here, and also you can omit both the start as well as the stop. Now this is yet another operation that is permissible with tuple. Now, why this is possible is because it is an ordered sequence. Okay, tuple is always an ordered sequence. And for this case, unpacking operation is permissible here. Let us see how the unpacking can be done here. Creating a tuple from a set of values. Okay, you're given with a set of values and you're creating a tuple out of it. Now, this procedure is called as packing. And we have seen how packing can be done. The basic example of creation of tuple itself is a packing. Example of packing. Now see this, what is unpacking? Creating individual values from a tuple's elements. So that means a tuple has to be there in beforehand, and creating individual values from those elements is called as unpacking. Packing something means you're assembling all your goods and then packing it inside a bag. Okay, backpack or something before going for a tour. Now, once you reach your destination, you will open your bag and then take out all the items, right? This is unpacking. Similar is happening here also. If you have a set of values and if you group them to form a tuple, the procedure is called packing. And if you do the reverse, it is called as unpacking. Now, see the syntax of unpacking. You have a list of variables. Okay, now all these list of variables is written on the left hand side of your assignment operator equal to the t. What is t? T is a defined tuple, so t has to be defined beforehand. Now what will happen is, something that you need to note here is the number of variables on your left hand side should be equal to the number of elements inside the tuple. Only then the multiple assignment can happen here. So suppose I'm having a tuple T with 4 elements. Say the elements are 1, 2, A and B. Now for unpacking, what is to be done? The format, you need to have a list of variables separated by comma. How many elements are there in the tuple? 4. So how many elements are supposed to be on the left hand side of your assignment operator? 4 variables, P, Q, R, comma, S. Now this is equated to T. Now what is T? T is 1, 2, A, B. Okay. So what will happen? You can replace a tuple with this here. Okay. So what will happen? 1 will be assigned to P, 2 will be assigned to Q, A will be assigned to S, and B will be assigned to, A will be assigned to R and B will be assigned to S. Now what is happening here? Multiple assignment is happening here. Okay. We saw how multiple assignment could happen. You can have multiple variables being assigned to a single value, or you can have multiple variables and multiple values on either side of the assignment operator, and the assignment happened order wise in which they were appearing. Now this is the same thing that will happen here. Instead, when you have an assignment like this, T would be replaced by the values of the tuple, and order wise it would be assigned. So P will be given. When you try to print the variables P, Q, R and S, we need to see whether the assignment happened as how the definition says. What will happen? The same values would be printed on your screen to prove that unpacking has been done. Clear? So we are done with the different permissible operations inside the tuple. Now next we are going to see the different functions and methods that are permissible with tuple. Now we have used the term functions as well as methods here, right? Just a second. So I told you functions means the function, you have the function name followed by the opening and closing bracket. Now this is not going to be used as a component of any other variable. In that case, it can be individually used. You call by the name functions. Methods are also functions, but the only difference is you need an object to access this method. So similar to something like a constructor. So you will have the function, the object dot the method name or the function name. This is how the methods are accessed. But to access a function, you need to write the function name, and as and how the syntax says, you need to use it like that. So we see the first function len. Now what will len do? It will return the length of the tuple. Length of the tuple means it will return the count of elements of the tuple. Now how to use it? That means it will be indicated in the syntax. So you need to use the name of the function as such because it is a keyword. So len of, and inside the function you need to give the tuple. So whatever tuple you are passing inside the function, what will the function do? It will count the number of items and then return an integer value. So suppose you have a tuple of the name student and you need to find the number of count of the items inside the tuple. What you need to do? You need to pass the name of the tuple or the tuple variable inside the function len. And if you try to print it, what will you get the result as? You get the result as 4 because there are 4 elements inside your tuple. Okay. Now let's see the second function. Second function is max. Now as the name says, it has something to do with maximum, right? So what this function does is, it will return the element from the tuple having the maximum value. We know that a tuple will have a number of elements, okay? And if you're passing the tuple inside the max function, what happens is, it will take each element by element, compare it and find the biggest element or the element with the maximum value and return to you that, okay? Now for max, elements of the tuple should be of same type. It is just telling it should be of the same type. So that doesn't mean you can only use numbers here. Even strings can be used. But in that case, the ASCII value of the strings would be considered and the one with the largest or biggest ASCII value would be printed as the result of maximum. Okay. So max means it will return the element from the tuple having the maximum value. Now you have a similar function to max here, which is this function. It is min. Min means it returns the element from the tuple having a minimum value. So min of tuple means you have a tuple T and the elements of the tuple are listed here. And when you're trying to print the minimum value inside the tuple, so the values would be compared and the least value inside the tuple would be given as your output. So the same condition that was prevailing when you were calculating max happens here also. For min function to work, the elements of tuple should be of the same type. Okay. So we are done with the functions. Now we are going to see the different methods. Now when we learned list, we had to learn around 9 methods here. But when we consider tuples, what we see is the number of methods inside the tuples are very few. Okay. So we just have 2 methods to learn inside tuple. The first method is index. Now what it does, it returns the index of an existing element of a tuple. So index means nothing but the position number. Now since this is a method, it has to be used along with the with an object. Now here the object is your tuple name. So the tuple should be existing and the element that whose position you are trying to find also should be present inside the tuple. So these things are mandatory. Now to use the function index, what you need to do is you need to have the tuple name dot operator followed by index function, okay, or index method. Now inside the index method you will be passing an element. Now what do we suppose? The element is a member of the tuple. Now to understand this method, let us see an example. We have a tuple T and these are the elements of the tuple, and then we are trying to print the index of, say, any particular element inside your tuple. So T dot index of -5. Now -5 is an element inside the tuple. So what will happen? The index value would be printed. Now usually when you're trying to print, you always get the forward index value. So since it is forward indexing is 0 based, at position 0 you have 3, at position 1 you have 4, and at position 2 you will have -5. So what will be the value given? The position value, and that value is 2. When we learned the method index, we told that it will return the position but of an existing element. So the element has to be present inside the tuple. If the item is not existing inside the tuple, Python will cast an error. Okay, showing that you cannot find the index for an element that is not present inside the tuple. So the next function is count. So count returns the count of occurrences of an element in a tuple. So what will count give you? Count is not giving you the number of items inside the tuple, but it will give the count of occurrence of any particular element. So you need to specify the element in count, and that particular element's occurrence would be counted and given to you as a result as an integer value. So count returns the count of occurrences of an element in a tuple. Now how to use the function count? The syntax is tuple name dot count of item. Okay. So inside the function count, you need to pass an item or element. Now since this is a method, it has to be accessed using an object. Here the object is nothing but the variable name assigned for your tuple. So the tuple name dot count of item. So inside the function count, you need to pass the element whose count or occurrences, number of occurrences had to be found out. Now I have purposefully given a tuple t with -5 occurring more than once so that you will better understand this. So suppose I am giving t is the name of the tuple. So I am trying to print the value of t dot count of -5. So what will happen? The starting index value is 0, 1, 2. So it is occurring at second position, 3, 4. It is occurring at fourth position and seventh position. But the position is immaterial here. It will just count the number of times the element is occurring and that value would be printed on the screen. How many times is -5 occurring inside the tuple? It occurs 3 times. So 3 would be printed. Suppose you're trying to find the count of element 4, the answer would be 1 because it is existing only once. Now suppose you're giving an item that is not existing inside the tuple. So that means that element has not even appeared even once inside the tuple. So the count will be always 0. So I hope this is also clear to you. So actually this is all for the day. So we have learned tuples in detail. To summarize, what are the things that we learned today? We learned the definition and representation of tuples. Now we saw that you can assign a variable name for a tuple and how to create. You could create the tuple using either tuple display construct or using the tuple function. Now the tuple function, you could create an empty tuple or a tuple with values. Okay. Now what are the demarking symbol for the tuple is parenthesis, opening and closing parenthesis. And then we learned the comparison. We compared tuples with list. We saw many similarities and we saw differences also, and why there are two different data types of almost the same type. That also we saw. We saw the various permissible operations in tuple. The permissible operations were almost very much similar to those that were permissible in strings as well as in list. Okay. Then we saw the different tuple functions and methods. Now when we learned this, we saw the difference between the term functions and then methods. Then we also saw that when you are learning functions and methods connected with tuple, you have only a smaller set of functions or methods to be learned when compared to list, because list had a pretty long list of functions or methods. We learned around 9 methods inside list. So with this, our session is over. So before winding up, let me give you a brief, let me remind you of my promo code SLYT, which will give you a 10% discount on the subscription fee of Unacademy. Okay. So with this note, we are winding up today's session, and good night to all my students. Till we meet again with another topic in the class 12 computer science. So thank you very much. for all those who have attended my class, and good night to everybody. The session is over.